is a GRDC investment, and it's always desirable to have a legume in the rotation. We always want a legume where we can, but in WA especially not always profitable. So this project was set up to kind of understand how we can maybe close the economic yield gap with our pulse crops that we grow in WA. So I've got a couple of growers involved as well, so I'll hand over to Jason and Ed shortly to give their views on the project and what we're doing. But I'll give you a bit of an overview of what we've been up to over the last couple of seasons. So this is the regional army that we have involved in the project. There are 13 grower groups spread from Yuna, where Jason is situated, through to Esperance in the south. So, it's a really good spread of groups representing almost every zone you can grow a pulse crop in WA. So, it's a really good representation, and all this work is basically just summarising what they're doing in their local areas. And the beauty of this project is it's kind of a grower-led investment. So, the growers get to decide in the grower groups, what's limiting adoption in our area of pulse crops. Is there something we can look at that would really improve adoption? And so in that sense, they're all looking at things that are most important to them in their local area. So, it really gets those adoption outcomes, which is really useful. Also well supported by DPIRD in this sense. So Mark Seymour is helping with some of the co-design of the trials and looking at the results. So we have that kind of feedback loop as well. So they've been really integral. There's three major components to this project. So it's a development and extension project. We're really trying to showcase what all the research has been done in the past and what's coming through to really show the improvements that are there and how you can really make a profitable situation out of pulse crops. So we've got a bit of a survey around what growers are currently doing with their grain legumes and how they're incorporating it and what they're using and what they're going to be using in the future. The research and demonstration sites, which I talked about. So most groups have either got 2 or 3 trial sites in each of those regions I had up there on the map. So it's quite a number of trials. And then we're trying to put some gross margins around this, so really understand some of the economics behind some of the treatments that we're looking at in some of the experiments. So a little bit on the survey that we did. We got over 100 responses across that kind of really broad 1,000-kilometre stretch of WA. And not surprisingly, most growers are pretty experienced in growing pulses in their systems. The biggest benefits, no surprise again, end fixation, as Rob's just talked about, major benefit, disease breaks for your cereals, and also controlling things like ryegrass. They're the biggest benefits we're getting from growing pulses. But again, not surprising, most of the pulse crops grown in WA are lupins and have been for some time. 84% of those surveyed are growing lupins and will continue to do so. But, fava beans has been, quite an increase in that. Field peas have been pretty stable. They have a pretty stable crop in WA as far as the pulse crops go. And there's been an increase in vetch as well. So people are getting into vetch for brown manuring and other kind of situations. So this is kind of the story in WA. Lupins have been a mainstay. They grow really well in our sandy acidic soils. So, we grow a lot of lupins and we do really well. But as, canola has come into the program as a break crop option, it's really taken off. And it's really hard to compete with something that's $700 a tonne and plus against lupins, which traditionally have probably gotten no more than about $400 a tonne until very recently, where they're sitting around 500, 515, I hear. So that makes a bit of a difference to the profitability function of lupins, doesn't it? So from the survey, again, most growers are going to grow lupins in the next couple of seasons without any major issues, but less than 1 in 5 will have a crack with fava beans or try field peas, and less than 5% are even going to go near chickpeas and lentils, obviously being burnt and found them a bit too difficult to deal with and probably not getting the yields that they need to make them profitable. So the reasons they're not growing them: commodity price, market access in WA continues to be an issue, overall profitability, but then some agronomic issues. So harvestability continues to be a problem. Harvest fires and legumes are always a common situation, but also you lose a lot of grain from your pulse crops compared to cereals and canola as well, so you leave a lot on the ground. And like Glenn just mentioned, broadleaf weeds are a major detriment in some of the pulse crops. So a really interesting thing that came out of the survey was that, production area varies across the farms. Some people are growing no pulse crops at all and finding that's profitable. Some are growing over 4,500 hectares in one season. And so obviously they have a soil type and climate, which is very profitable for a pulse crop. So it just gives an idea of the large variation there is in soil types and climate zones across WA and how people find them profitable and the perceived risk or economic benefit that those farmers are getting. So DPIRD, a number of years ago, looked at what we need to grow a pulse crop, and in WA, it's pretty tough to meet a lot of these criteria. Soil pH 5 to 9. We have a lot of acidic soils, and we're trying through liming to get that up to about 5.5. But that's only just in the preference zone for a lot of the pulse crops. Acid soil-tolerant rhizobia is going to make a big difference to that situation. Soil texture, we've got coarse sandy soils, probably not fitting quite in there. Yield stability of field peas is okay, but the other crops have got a bit of a way to go. Waterlogging, duplex soils, we have a lot of that. So fava beans go all right with waterlogging, but the rest really hate wet feet. Sodic soils, we've got plenty of those. And then, once you have pH issues, acidity, you bring in those other soil constraints like aluminium, boron, those kind of things. And when you've got an unhappy plant already, fungicides are pretty important. You've got pathogens coming in to susceptible plants. So there's a lot we need to really overcome in WA, and we're continuing to do that. So not surprisingly, most growers thought we need more pulse research in WA to tackle those kind of issues. And it's not like we haven't been doing that over the years. The breeders have been doing really well. The agronomic management that's coming along is really improving yields over time. But, it's a slow burn, and this is, 30 years to improve yields by, half a tonne on average across WA. So you can see field peas there, and fava beans, have been improving a little bit faster in more recent times. But, we're not quite getting to the, 4-tonne lentils or 4-tonne fava beans that we're getting in the eastern states and being highly profitable. So where we need to see further investment, according to these growers, is, again, market access, commodity price. But they want to continue to see that genetics and cultivar development, which is occurring, the herbicide, fungicide packages, and then quantifying the end contributions. So really glad that Halo is going to delve into that a little bit. That'll be really important information, I think. So just a quick overview. I'm not going to go into any details. I'll get the guys up here to give a bit of details on some of the trials, but just an overview of what we're kind of covering and what the growers are really interested in their environments. So here we've got Facey Group in the central wheat belt, confronted with a lot of frost-prone areas. So they wanted to understand, time of sowing by crop type. So they can grow a lot of the pulse crops in their area quite easily. So they tried chickpeas and vetch and fava beans, field peas. They threw it all in there, 2 times the sowing. They found if they went in early, 2022 was a fantastic year. They grew heaps of biomass, grew lots of N, but they got heaps of disease. So time of sowing 2, which was a bit later, didn't get as much biomass, but they got much better yields. So that's how it worked in their environment in that year, but they're following it through and put wheat over the top last year. So we're going to look at the gross margins around that. Still on the coast farmers, so on the south coast near Albany, time of sowing again by row spacing. They grow a lot of fava beans down that area. They wanted to understand the disease incidence in chocolate spot by varying their row spacing and their time of sowing. So they got such a wet year that it was completely waterlogged. They couldn't even get on to spray it. So kind of affected the disease incidence in that sense. But you can see there's Mark Seymour chatting at their field day and upskilling some of the growers around controlling disease in fava beans. Here's Nathan Craig at the West Midlands group. So West Midlands were quite interested in growing chickpea, lupin and vetch, but really trying to tweak the economics to get the best herbicide packages. So they want to understand what controls weeds the best and what is the most economic approach for them to take. And then a few other groups, Levy group in the north, looking at acid soil-tolerant rhizobia. Another couple of groups did that as well. I can say after doing that last year, it was 3 big ticks. They all improved N fixation in acid soils. And that's commercially available this year. So that's a really big tick for that group who have done that work. SERP, we're looking at lentils and fava beans on the south coast. They do really well in that port zone. So they're looking at varieties of lentils and also disease incidence in fava beans. And Ravensthorpe, the rain group, looking at field peas and rhizobia inoculation types and things like that, just to see if they actually need to inoculate year on year to get the best results. So you can see the breadth of research and the different pulses that we're looking at. I'm not going to touch on this. This is Justine from the Lift group in Lake Grace, and Ed's going to chat a bit more about some of the trials that he hosted. And this is the Yuna Farm Improvement Group. So Jason's going to talk a little bit about the vetch and lupin trials that they had on farm. But you can see, the development and extension is happening. These grower groups are integral to holding these field days and upskilling growers around some of the different pulses they can grow and in some cases introducing pulses that wouldn't normally be grown in that system just to see if it works or if it doesn't. So it's a really good opportunity. But I'll just finish by touching on the gross margin analysis we're trying to do. This is an example of one we're doing in Minginoo. So they had a phosphorus and potassium trial in lupins. They just wanted to understand if it boosted profitability of that lupin crop or affected the yield in year one, and if that carried over into year two wheat crop. So they actually found in year one, P&K treatments had no effect. So T1 to T16 on that graph is there's no significant difference between any of the lupin treatments at all. The following wheat crop, again, no significant differences. So, they put on all this P&K and it made no difference to the yields in those 2 years. But what we're really pulling out of this is if you look to the right of that dashed line there, we have lupin wheat rotation. So that's the kind of district average, what the rest of the growers got around Minginoo. And you can see they got about half the yields of this grower. He was getting 4.5 tonnes of lupins in 2022, which is a very good year. But he also went 2 tonnes of wheat last year in a pretty tough area in the north. So he did particularly well. The wheat and wheat rotation wasn't as profitable as his lupin wheat rotation, and canola wheat definitely stacks up, and you can see why canola is so profitable. But really, when we get some information like this, we can kind of tease in and go, well, okay, what's this grower doing differently? He's getting double the yields of everyone else in that area. So, we try and understand what growers are doing differently and then get those messages out so we can really improve the profitability, across not only that district but across WA if there's some really good messages to come out. So that's where this kind of legume leaders program has come out, where we've really started. So it just gives that kind of peer-to-peer learning, growers talking to growers about what they're doing really well and what's working and what's not. So these growers have all given up their time to not only host the trials, but they've also made their phone numbers or emails available. So if anyone else wanted to have a crack with fava beans who had never done it before, they could actually call up one of these guys who's done it for a few years and is starting to make it profitable and fits in their farming rotation, and actually find out, how did you do this? So this is a really, really good program that we're getting, and these growers are giving up their time to not only host the trials but do this program as well. So we really can't thank them enough. So I'm actually going to get Jason and Ed to come up now and have a chat. So I'll hand it over to Jason now just to give you some more details on one of the trials I had in Yuna. And then we'll get Ed to follow up and bring us home with Lake Grace. So I'll hand over to you, Jason.
That's the green one?
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. As you heard, I farm in Yuna, northeast Yuna, 10,000 hectares. About 30% of that is fallow each year. So I guess I farm with my brother, Kim, wife, Jasmine, and nephew, Denver. So in 2021, local agronomist Nick Ayres suggested we give vetch a try, as we were struggling to find a legume with early vigour to grow in our heavier soil types. Vetch's seed size allowed us to sow deeper into moisture, and we were really impressed with the early vigour and growth throughout their season in 2021. So in 2022, Yuna Farm Improvement Group began working with GGA on this project. The photo here, it's this pretty shitty wheat crop that I got a photo in, but it's a interesting photo because I don't use umbrellas that much in the northern ag region because it doesn't actually rain that much up there. So, but our traditional break of the season is around the 25th of May. So we do a lot of dry seeding on deeper sowing to chase moisture if we've had early autumn rainfall. The other photo is when GGA visited in July 22, and that's showing the growth of the lupins and vetch side by side that was sowed in the trial. So we planted, I will watch the video here. Like the end bit, because that's what the good patches were yielding that year. So we planted 70 hectares of vetch around the trial site in 2022. and it yielded 2 tonne per hectare. We found that harvesting vetch with crop lifters is essential as it lays over when maturing, and you need to harvest as soon as possible to prevent further lodging. Studenica and Presto were the 2 varieties that we've tried and been really impressed with Studenica, and it's easy to thrash when harvesting and is also very palatable for livestock. Move on from that one. So 2022 was a really great rainfall year. Not huge rainfall compared to other parts of the state, but good for us. Our annual rainfall is around that 250 mil. So we grew a lot of biomass in that year at the trial site, especially before spraying out the brown manure plots. The grain plots yielded well, but the lupin plots finished a bit early due to the early April sowing and didn't capitalise on the late season rainfall. So you see, pretty much made our season in 22, that 67 mil in August. Interestingly, the lupins that year on the sandier soil types were yielding sort of averaging 3 to 4 tonnes a hectare, which is a bit unheard of in our area. Rainfall in 2023, very light on, but we were able to sow the trial to wheat on the 9th of May into moisture. You see that little bit of rain there, which is on the 7th of May, that fell, that 9 mil. So in 2022, we took above ground cuts of the after brown manuring, and the deep herd team calculated the lupin levels that you see there, nitrogen levels. The vetch plots were harvested with conventional combine with crop lifters on a draper front, and the lupin plots we took off the crop lifters and just harvest them as we usually would. So you see there the dry matter, I would have thought it would have been more in the vetch that year, but it's just due to the denseness of the lupin plant with that dry matter. The grain yield was quite good at 2.88 for the lupins and 2.4 for the vetch. So the trial site was sown to wheat in 2023, last year. The grain plots looked ordinary all year due to the staggered germination in these plots. There was enough moisture in the profile for all other plots to establish in May, but the grain plots didn't fully establish until the 9th of June when the break of season occurred, which is far too late in the northern ag region. So this is typically what we see, like good yield in the fallow. Very impressed with that lupin brown manure. It was brown manured before we had that late rain, so it was brown manured in late July. So we had all that late rain, and then really with that there, another thing to note with the vetch brown manure is that the vetch actually, I won't say it survived, but it tolerated the 1.5 of glyphosate that it had, and I think from memory about 750 of 2,4-D amine. So one thing that we have noticed with the vetch is it can be quite hard to kill once it's fully established due to the robustness of the plant. So some soil results show the vetch brown manure produced really good levels of nitrogen throughout the profile. Interestingly, last year we expected the brown manure plots to burn off a bit more than what they did, but we didn't really notice any burn off within the plots. And the fallow and lupin brown manure was similar, as was the vetch and lupin grain plots. So hopefully we can plant this site to wheat again this season, 2024, and see if we've any carryover nitrogen given the poor season last year. So just a few soil tests following the lupin. Nitrate, not bad nitrate levels there compared to the grain with the brown manure. The fallow, similar to the lupin, but probably the big thing that we notice in the fallow is the fact that the nitrogen's readily available for the plant once it germinates rather than it picking up late in the season. So, hang on, back. Right. And just in finishing, moisture is king, and it always has been in the northern ag region. Growers need legumes that we can harvest to bring our seed costs down. And continued research needs to happen as legumes are essential in our rotations for grain and mixed farming systems. And any trial is a worthwhile trial, and every year is different and throws up new questions and challenges, which is what we saw last year. Thank you.
Your mind starts working from the day you're born and stops when you get up to make a speech. But I've got a little cheat sheet here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Naisbitt. I'm a broadacre full cropping farmer from the Lake Grace area. I have been growing lupins as part of my cropping rotation for over 40 years. And I know what you're all thinking. He doesn't look that old. In 2023, I hosted 2 lupin trials after the Lakes Information and Farming Technology Group, otherwise known as the LIFT Group. I haven't got any photos up, I'm sorry about that. Green? Otherwise known as the LIFT Group, in conjunction with Justine Tyson from Console Ag. There's Justine, doing the heavy lifting. Asked for a farmer to put their hand up. I hadn't hosted any cropping trials for many years, so I decided to have a go. There were 2 lupin trials. There were 2 lupin trials held on my North Lake Grace block. The first trial involved 3 phosphorus repetitions of 5.5, 9 and 16 units of P in the fertiliser. The crop grew well, and visually the highest P looked the best. Interestingly, the highest yield and thus the most profitable came from the lowest application of phosphorus. This leaves us with questions. We know what we know now until we know some more. The second trial included fallow in a strip, brown manure in another, where lupins were sprayed out in early September, and lupins harvested in a third strip. The results of this will come out at the end of 2024, after the wheat crop is planted this season. Although preliminary results show that the lupins harvested give the best profitability at the halfway mark. In my experience, there are both benefits and challenges in dealing with lupins. I always get my best crop growing on a lupin stubble. This is obviously due to the extra nitrogen fixed in the soil and the disease break it offers. We also get benefits from being able to use different chemistry on the weeds. Growing lupins do present marketing challenges. There are not a lot of global demand for them, and we hope this changes in the future. But for now, the market is mostly at a domestic level. Our lupins have been sold primarily to sheep and cattle farmers. Trying to obtain a fixed price for the future is difficult due to the seasonal variation. Now, sorry about this. I might go back. This has meant that many farmers have been left storing lupins on farm for lengthy periods of time. This year we had a good price as the lupin crops in the north were drought affected. I'll grow lupins as I see the enormous benefits. I won't grow a big percentage of my program, less than 20%, due to the unpredictability of the prices, yield and season. When I first grew lupins back in 1983, the variety was Ilyari and the yield was about 1 tonne. I always remember trying to get the new varieties, and it was said that their yields were always about 10 to 15% more than the last one. That would mean my current lupin crops would have to be yielding about 15 tonne to the hectare. And this has not happened yet. The variety I've grown recently is durian and yielded about 1.8 tonne this year. A lot of this I attribute to our change in farming practices, no-till and much earlier sowing. If we could have a shorter flowering window on our lupins and get the pods on the 4th spike, we could potentially start getting even higher yields. If we had Roundup ready lupins, then I would not grow canola. I believe I would get better results from lupins, so that is something to think about. Now, I wanted to show you this photo because of the bus in there. So last year I thought I'd let you know of the stress of having 40 odd people come to have a look at your trials. So here are our trials. Now, that's it. Oh, here we go. Because I was unable at this time of the year to walk across my paddocks, at this time, my wife, mum and father-in-law were out there picking radish in the areas the bus would travel. So, although this is not much, like a farmer can spot a radish plant and see, if you have a look over Justine's right shoulder there, so right about there, there's a rogue radish plant. And so I'm not sure who to blame, my mum, my wife or my father-in-law for that one. But so these guys went and picked all this radish on the route that the bus would travel. But unfortunately, someone forgot to tell the bus driver, and he came around the other way. So, yeah, so the radish we were going to pick after the bus had gone, we didn't have to worry about then. All in all, we had a great day. The field day was a good day and a few beers afterwards. So, thanks very much.